The government announces a pay rise for public sector workers, though how much won't be known until next year. Firefighters, police, military and teachers will be among those to see an increase after the pay freeze imposed last year.
What have been really tight times, the fact that the cost of living has been going up and wages haven't been, will have affected everybody.
How big will the pay rise be? The government can't confirm whether it will be in line with inflation. Also tonight, a virtual audience today for the Queen, but the Palace announces she will not attend the Global Climate Summit COP26 in Glasgow. On the set of Sir David Attenborough's latest series, he says world leaders mustn't delay on climate change any longer.
If we don't act now, it will be too late.
COVID infections are falling in England, but the government says it's too soon to draw any firm conclusions. The raw sewage pumped into the sea for 49 hours straight, and the government under pressure to stop it. And bowing out, the princess who's quit the Japanese royal family to marry her commoner fiancé.
And coming up on Sports Day later in the hour on the BBC News channel, tributes have been paid to Walter Smith, one of Rangers' greatest managers, who's died at the age of 73.
Good evening and welcome to the BBC News at 6. Millions of public sector workers will get a pay rise next year. The government says it will lift the pay freeze introduced last November, and nurses, teachers, members of the armed forces are among those who'll benefit. The increase won't be known until next spring and depends on recommendations from independent pay review bodies. The government won't confirm whether the pay rises will be above inflation. Labour says tax and price rises mean families are facing a cost of living crisis. Here's our political editor, Laura Koonsberg.
Look very carefully. Promises may not be exactly what they appear. It's nearly budget time, and there are plenty of vows and pledges around. Teachers in the classroom are just some of 2.5 million public sector staff who've had their pay frozen in England. That technical limit will disappear next year. Welcome in this head's office.
I think probably like everybody else in what have been really tight times, the fact that the cost of living has been going up and wages haven't been, will have affected everybody. Specifically within schools, knowing that pay freeze has been there has meant that people have been adversely affected, and you feel it on a day-to-day basis.
Before he's even back on the steps with the red box tomorrow, the Chancellor's already come up with a long list of what sound like goodies. After the shock of the pandemic, it seems the economy's returning to something like normal, with more vigour than expected. But the politician, who wants the red box for Labour, says check the terms and conditions.
Are these pay rises going to match the rising cost of living, with inflation set to reach 4 or even 5%? And second, where does this money come from? Will it come from the departmental budgets, which means there's less money then for the other things that schools and hospitals and the police force need to pay for? Or is the Chancellor going to provide new money to pay for this welcome increase in public sector pay?
The cash for extra wages will come out of each department's pot of money, rather than any extra from number 11. And the size of any wage rise isn't set yet.
The pay review bodies for nurses, for police, etc., and teachers will go away. They'll consider over the next few months what's the appropriate recommendation to government. They will then recommend that to the Chancellor, and then he'll announce that early next year.
We won't know for months how much extra teachers, firefighters, nurses, or anyone else whose wages are paid by the taxpayer will actually get. And we won't know until tomorrow how much in total the Chancellor wants to spend on the different parts of the public sector, whether that's education, defence, care or anything else. So much of what we've heard so far from the Chancellor about the budget is political signalling. And it's the small print when he's on his feet in the House of Commons tomorrow that really counts.
Order.
And the big headlines out there have already raised heckles in here.
This House will not be taken for granted. It is not right for everybody to be briefed. It's not more important to go on the news in the morning. It's more important to come here.
But the Chancellor's chosen to warm up for his big budget day with a canine audience. he may encounter a less relaxed one in the morning. Laura Koonsberg, BBC News, Westminster.
Well, our economics editor Faisal Islam joins me now. So Faisal, this sounds like good news, but it's not been given an entirely wholehearted welcome.
Well, it'll certainly be a relief for 5 million workers that the freeze no longer applies, but the precise generosity of it is to be worked out in terms of the funding. And more than that, you have to compare any pay rise to the rate of inflation. And as we know, prices are rising. People just need to look at record petrol pump prices, the prospect of record domestic energy bills too, to see that inflation's heading up to 4 to 5%. So whether or not these rises will match inflation, you've also got to add in the national insurance rise too. To keep track with the living standards, that really is up for grabs. We don't know. And it's actually tracked a pattern of many of the announcements that we've already heard about this budget that's coming tomorrow, which is when you dig down, you see that they're spread over a period of years and they don't involve much day-to-day spending. That's what Rishi Sunak's trying to get under control, try to get that lower than how much taxation he brings in at the end of the Parliament. Because although we're used to this Chancellor spending hundreds of billions of pounds, borrowing hundreds of billions of pounds during the pandemic rescue, I think tomorrow is about him drawing a line under that and showing that he's tough on the public finances and tough on borrowing.
We shall see. Faisal, thank you. After concerns about rising COVID infection levels, there are signs that cases are beginning to plateau, even drop slightly in England. But 263 deaths were recorded today across the UK. That's the highest since February. Now, it may be due to unusually low reporting of deaths over the weekend. One of the developers of the AstraZeneca vaccine has told a committee of MPs that the situation is improving. The government, though, is urging caution and says it's too soon to draw any firm conclusions. So what's going on? Here's our health editor, Hugh Pym.
There's a new push to vaccinate 12 to 15-year-olds in England this week, with bookings possible at vaccination hubs during half-term. And there was no shortage of takers at this centre in Walsall.
At first it was a bit scary, but then when you actually have the jab, there wasn't that much pain, so then I relaxed a little bit after.
We've all in this together, we've all got to take our part, including the children. And I think it's very important as well that the schools don't have the pressure of getting the children vaccinated.
But in Nottingham, with walk-ins for booster jabs now possible, there was a more downbeat mood.
The Delta variant is such a worry and the NHS is under so much pressure. We've really got to do everything that we can to help.
Those of us who are being a bit more sensible are having to go along with this booster just to try to protect us a little bit extra.
Scotland's First Minister, meanwhile, was stressing the need for continued caution.
At our meeting today, the Cabinet agreed to make no change to the current regulations that are in place. This reflects our assessment that, although the situation has greatly improved since August, it does remain fragile as we head into the winter period.
So where do things go from here with COVID? Well, scientists and modellers say there's still a lot of uncertainty, but some take the view that partly because of the continued vaccine rollout, case numbers may stabilise and perhaps fall back a bit. One of the leading players in the development of vaccines noted that while the virus was still spreading, he believed the outlook was a bit brighter.
We are in an improving situation because of high vaccination coverage that we have. The booster programme will start limiting even further the number of cases and particularly those hospitalised cases. And actually there's lots of infection that's happened in the community which is boosting lots of the younger people as well, including children.
But whatever happens with COVID, hospitals around the UK are under serious pressure, with a backlog of routine work which has built up. And with concerns about flu, there are predictions of a very challenging winter ahead for the NHS. Hugh Pym, BBC News.
Well, Tony, the latest official figures, they show there were 40,954 new infections recorded in the latest 24-hour period. That's about 3,000 fewer cases than last Tuesday. It means an average of 44,702 new cases were reported per day in the last week. There were 8,693 people in hospital with COVID as of yesterday. 263 deaths were reported of people who died within 28 days of a positive COVID-19 test. It follows unusually low death figures over the weekend, as I mentioned earlier. On average in the past week, 140 related deaths were recorded every day. A BBC investigation has found the parents of the Manchester arena bomber Salman Abedi living in the Libyan capital Tripoli, where they are under surveillance by the authorities. They are both suspects in the case, but have not been charged with any offence. Ramadan Abedi and his wife Samia Tabal left the UK for Libya in April 2017, a month before the attack, in which 22 people died. Both would be arrested if they set foot back in the UK. Their other son, Hasham, has been convicted of mass murder for his role in the attack. Orla Guerin sent this report from Tripoli.
Being escorted to face justice, Hasham Abedi, brother of the Manchester bomber, is brought to Tripoli airport in 2019.
My name is Hasham Abedi, being captured the day of 23rd of May 2017 by FTS, and the case is Manchester bombing. And I'm getting transferred back to Britain.
Are you okay with me to look? Are you sure?
British officials politely ask if they can search his belongings in these never-before-seen images obtained exclusively by the BBC. Then he's walked out to a private plane to be extradited to the UK. A 4-hour flight to a lifetime behind bars. He remains the only person convicted for the Manchester bombing and is now serving a sentence of 55 years. But what of his parents, who are both suspects in the case?
Hello?
We went to the family home on the outskirts of Tripoli.
Hello?
It looks abandoned, but it's not.
Well, a neighbour has just confirmed to us that the Abedi family is still using this house. Crucially, he says Ramadan Abedi and his wife Samia, the parents of the Manchester bomber, were here at the house just a few days ago. Manchester police have questions for them. So does the Council for the Public Inquiry in the UK. But the parents aren't talking.
Ismail, BBC News. Can I ask you a few questions, please, Ismail?
Neither is Ismail Abedi, the bomber's older brother, seen here last year. He left the UK in August, whereabouts unknown.
Minister, nice to see you.
We asked Libya's foreign minister, who is British-born herself, if he too might be here.
I think there is collaboration between the General Attorney Office and some figures in England related to this issue. We are respecting the judicial system and we don't want to interfere in this, but also we are willing to collaborate from political perspective if there is anything we can do from our side.
It's unclear what help, if any, Britain is now requesting from Tripoli. A security source here told us Libya has no evidence against the bomber's parents, but he added, "We are watching the family constantly." Orla Guerin, BBC News, Tripoli.
The former Conservative Minister Owen Paterson has defended his conduct after the Parliamentary Standards Watchdog recommended that he be suspended from the Commons for 30 days. In a report, the regulator said he'd repeatedly broken lobbying rules while working as a paid consultant for 2 firms. But Mr Paterson denied wrongdoing, saying he was trying to alert the authorities to carcinogenic substances in milk and ham. The Metropolitan Police has apologised to the family of 2 murdered sisters for failings in the way it responded when they were reported missing. Bieber Henry and Nicole Smallman were killed in northwest London last year. An investigation has found a missing persons log was incorrectly closed and inquiries weren't progressed. The sisters' mother said the Met's apology was 10 months too late. Here's our Home Affairs correspondent, June Kelly.
When social worker Bieber Henry on the left and her younger sister Nicole Smallman were reported missing after an outdoor birthday party, it was their friends who launched a search. They and their family were frustrated by the initial police response, and it was Nicole's boyfriend who found their bodies. The killer, Daniel Hussein, had hidden them in undergrowth. Now the Metropolitan Police has apologised to the mother of the sisters, Mina Smallman, and her family after the police watchdog found they were badly let down. Her response was blunt. In a statement, she said, "Sorry is something you say when you comprehend the wrong you do and take full responsibility for it. demonstrating that by taking appropriate proportionate action, which to our minds is not going to happen. The investigation was not handled appropriately. The apology should have been done face-to-face and not nearly 10 months later. The head of the Met, Dame Cressida Dick, has offered to apologise in person. Failings in the investigation included a duty inspector who closed the police logs, a civilian member of staff who recorded inaccurate information, and a call handler who referred to one of the sisters as a suspect. Their family and others have also questioned whether their ethnicity was a factor.
I just think if this had been a white, middle-class social worker who'd gone missing, had got no history of going missing before, I do wonder whether it would have been taken more seriously.
On this, the police watchdog says it found no evidence of stereotyping or bias in the sisters' case. June Kelly, BBC News.
The time is 6:15. Our top story this evening. Public sector workers are to get a pay rise, but how much won't be known until next spring. And a virtual audience today for the Queen, but the Palace announces she will not attend the Global Climate Summit COP26 in Glasgow.
Coming up on Sports Day in the next 15 minutes on the BBC News Channel, one of South Africa's stars opts out of their latest match at the T20 World Cup after the players are told that they have to take a knee.
If we don't act now, it will be too late. The words of Sir David Attenborough as he calls on the world to stop climate change. And he says the richest nations need to meet their moral responsibility by helping the most vulnerable survive the effects of it. The 95-year-old broadcaster took a break from filming his new documentary series to speak to our science editor, David Shipman.
This is a thermal camera, and it will tell me the difference between the surrounding temperature and the temperature in the centre of a daisy flower.
New technology to film the humble daisy.
And action, David.
At Kew Gardens in London, we had rare access behind the scenes to the making of Green Planet.
Well, they're all old friends, aren't they? It's the nice thing.
We caught up with David Attenborough several times during the filming.
Daisies are things that you decapitate with your lawnmower sort of once a week. But actually they are marvellous things. And they move every day. They exploit the sunshine and open to the sunshine. The interesting thing is we now have a camera which allows us to actually explore the surface of a plant in great detail, so it's like moving into a different landscape. Like suddenly this thing is a huge, great thing, and you suddenly see it for what it is. This is a battlefield. Its tendrils are highly sensitive to touch. Got it. You can build up a sequence into a real drama, so you really feel that that particular plant is hell-bent on strangling some other plant, which they often are, of course.
The Attenborough message is that unless we think about plants, we're never going to tackle climate change. And he says that time is anyway running out for the richest countries to take action.
It would be really catastrophic if the developed nations of the world, the more powerful nations of the world, simply ignored these problems. Do we say, oh, it's nothing to do with us and because our arms? We caused it. Our kind of industrialization is one of the major factors in producing this change in climate. We have a moral responsibility. Even if we didn't cause it, we would have a moral responsibility to do something about thousands of men, women and children who have lost everything. Can we just goodbye and say it was no business of ours? You have to believe there's still things to be done about it. And I believe there are. The question is, on a world scale, when is it too late? But it's difficult to see. If we don't act now, it will be too late.
Action, David! If you get up and walk away as if you were going back to that tree.
I watched you filming almost non-stop for 5 hours this morning. You're 95. It's an incredibly impressive sight. What are you planning next?
Well, I don't plan very far ahead. As you say, I'm 95. How long can you go on? It isn't within our gift to say those things or to know those things. All I know is that if I get up tomorrow and I feel that I'm able to do a decent day's work, then I should jolly well do it.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
David Attenborough talking there. In the last hour, the Palace has announced the Queen will not attend the Global Climate Summit COP26 in Glasgow. Today, she carried out her first official engagement since she was ordered to rest by doctors last week. Our royal correspondent Johnny Diamond joins me. So, what more can you tell us, Johnny?
Well, it's good news and bad news today, Fiona. I mean, the good news was the resumption of official engagements. The Queen saw 2 ambassadors as they presented their credentials, and the Palace released some pictures, and you can see in the pictures, in fact, she's very pleased to be back. There's a beaming smile on her face. She had been doing light duties for the last 4 or 5 days, ever since she cancelled the trip to Northern Ireland last Wednesday and spent the night in hospital here in central London. The bad news, as you say, is that on the advice of her doctors, she's not going to travel to Glasgow in about 10 days' time, 5 days' time rather, to hold an evening reception for the climate change conference. That was probably going to be one of the big moments of the conference, aside from the negotiations themselves. But on the advice of her doctors, regretfully taking the decision, disappointing, she says, she'll do a video address instead.
Okay, Johnny, thank you. Well, the government's green policies are coming in for renewed scrutiny, not just on climate change, but also on the cleanliness of our waters. Raw sewage was released into coastal waters and rivers in England 400,000 times in the last year. Last week, MPs voted against an amendment to a bill that would have imposed a legal duty on water companies to stop doing it. It's being debated now in the House of Lords, and in the last few minutes, the government has said it will strengthen the bill. Our correspondent Zoe Conway has more.
This is untreated sewage being released into Langstone Harbour in Hampshire. The footage was shot last Thursday. The sewage poured out of it for 49 hours straight.
I just couldn't believe what I was seeing. The general reaction from people on social media who've seen the film now, they really are astonished.
The sewage came from here, the Budds Farm treatment plant run by Southern Water. It's allowed to discharge what the company says is heavily diluted wastewater into the harbour during heavy rainfall. This prevents it backing up and causing flooding.
The concern is not just the fecal matter that's coming out through that sewage treatment plant, it's full of chemicals as well. All the chemicals we use every day that are underneath our sinks, and we keep them locked away from our children because they're toxic, they come out here.
It's not clear yet whether this 49-hour spill will be considered to be legal or not. In July, Southern Water was hit with a £90 million fine after pleading guilty to thousands of illegal discharges. Southern Water told the BBC it's investing in infrastructure and natural projects such as enhanced wetlands to reduce water runoff. But it's not just in Hampshire that this is happening. A sewage treatment plant less than a mile from where I'm standing in Wallingford in Oxfordshire discharged untreated sewage into this stretch of the River Thames for 993 hours last year. Thames Water admits these discharges are unacceptable, and it says it's working with the government to stop them from happening.
You can't simply eliminate these overnight. To do so would cost hundreds of billions of pounds. And while there are some that we'd be able to remove and to reduce altogether, for some it'll be, the cost of doing so will be prohibitive.
For the last few days, anger has been mounting at the government's position. What everyone agrees on is that Britain's Victorian water system needs rescuing, but it will cost billions and billions to do so. Zoe Conway, BBC News.
The former Scotland and Rangers manager Walter Smith has died. He was 73. He won 10 top flight titles as manager, 5 Scottish Cups and 6 League Cups. Rangers said that he was a club legend who would be sorely missed. Alistair Lamont reports.
Celebrating success was something Walter Smith and Rangers did a lot of, his time at Ibrox littered with trophies. Outside the stadium today, the sense of loss was both deep and personal.
He was Mr. Rangers, he was everybody's Rangers dad. It's not just the passing of a man, he's a legend.
So it wasn't a family member. He began coaching at a young age, joining the Graham Souness revolution at Rangers before becoming manager in 1991. His legendary status at the club was sealed when Rangers matched Celtic's feat of 9 straight title wins. Even his magic touch couldn't revive the fortunes of an ailing Everton, and so in 2004 he returned to Scotland as manager of the national team. But the lure of his beloved Rangers was strong, and when he was asked back, he couldn't say no. 3 more league titles followed. Walter Smith's influence was most keenly felt here, but he did transcend both Rangers and Scottish football. Tributes have come today from Celtic, from Sir Kenny Dalglish, from Sir Alex Ferguson, and also from Pep Guardiola and David Moyes, to name but a few.
Walter was an incredible leader, a very successful manager here at Rangers. I think he epitomised everything that this club stands for. His DNA is all over the club, and it's obviously very sad news.
Scotland has lost one of its most remarkable sons. There is a poignancy, though, that he lived long enough to see Rangers once again crowned Scottish champions.
The former Scotland and Rangers manager Walter Smith, who's died aged 73. Japan's Princess Mako has married a commoner and left the royal family. There was no Shinto ceremony or big reception for the niece of the emperor. Instead, she and her fiancé went to the equivalent of the Tokyo Registry Office. The marriage was delayed by almost 4 years amid intense scrutiny and criticism of the match, which took a mental toll on the princess. From Tokyo, here's Rupert Wingfield-Hayes.
No grand wedding ceremony, no cheering crowds, just a very formal goodbye from Princess Mako to her parents. At first, her sister Princess Kako does the same, but then she steps forward for a very un-Japanese hug. It was the most touching moment in what has been a strange day. A few minutes later, the now former princess was sitting before the media with her new husband, Kei Komura. Ever since their engagement, Mr. Komura's humble origins have been the target of Japanese tabloids. In central Tokyo, around 100 protesters gathered today, still demanding the marriage be called off. We're marching today because we don't want the imperial family to be involved in crimes, this woman says. The main accusation is that Mr. Komura's widowed mother owes £25,000 to a former lover. But the media frenzy has even extended to him daring to wear his hair in a ponytail.
In Britain, the fact that Princess Catherine is descended from coal miners is no longer a barrier to her one day becoming queen. But when it comes to the family that live in the palace behind me here, attitudes are still incredibly conservative. And a surprisingly large number of Japanese people appear to have looked at Mr. Komura and his family background and decided he is just not suitable to marry a princess.
But such attitudes could be driving the Japanese imperial family towards extinction. Princess Mako's departure today leaves the family with just 17 members, only 4 of whom are male. Rupert Wingfield-Hayes, BBC News in Tokyo.
Well, good luck to them. Right, let's take a look at the weather. Darren Bett is here. Hi, Darren.
Hello there, Fiona. Isn't this a lovely picture taken by a weather watcher in Durham earlier today? And the temperature in the northeast of England was 17 degrees this afternoon. Normally at this time of the year, maximums are around 11 Celsius in this part of the UK. Now, the reason it's so very mild is because the winds are coming from a long way south, all the way from the tropics over the Azores and into the UK. But there's rain focused on that weather front there, and that's going to stick around over the next few days. So not only is it going to be very mild, but it's also going to be very wet in places, southern uplands, Cumbrian Fells, northern Pennines, and then into West Wales. And with all that rain, there's likely to be some flooding as well. Now, over the past few hours, we've had the rain, particularly in Scotland towards the northwest. The main band of rain is sitting here in the northwest, and that will move southwards overnight, moving away eventually from northern Scotland, moving into southern Scotland, Northern Ireland, then down into the Irish Sea and into the northwest of England. Some heavy rain in the hills. Still got brisk southwesterly winds, going to be very mild tonight. Some areas will see temperatures no lower than 14 or 15 degrees. But we still have some rain around for tomorrow. Same sort of areas really. Could affect Northern Ireland at times, may push up towards the central belt of Scotland, but it's mainly southern Scotland, the northwest of England and over the Irish Sea. Some heavy showers in the northwest of Scotland and to the south of our rain band. It's generally dry, some brightness, bit of sunshine like today, but temperatures could get up to around 18 Celsius. But there will be some heavy rain in places, and with that weather front still on the scene overnight and into Thursday, that rain is going to keep going across northern and western parts of the UK. So we may well start with some rain in Northern Ireland, should turn a bit more showery, start with some wet weather in Scotland. It continues wet on Thursday in southern Scotland. We see rain across Wales this time and other western parts of England. Again, some heavy rain over the hills, flood levels probably rising, but again ahead of that towards some eastern parts of England, temperatures are going to reach 17 degrees in some sunshine, but there is more rain around on Friday. Fiona.
Thanks, Darren. A reminder of our top story this evening. The government announces a pay rise for public sector workers, including police, military and teachers, though how much won't be known until next year. And a virtual audience today for the Queen, but the Palace has announced she will not attend the Global Climate Summit COP26 in Glasgow later this month. That's all from the BBC News at 6. It's goodbye from me, and on BBC One, we can join the BBC's news teams where you are. Bye-bye.
Hello there, I'm Ollie Foster. Here's what's coming up for you on Sports Day this evening. Tributes to one of Rangers' greatest managers, Walter Smith, has died at the age of 73. Another step towards the 2023 Women's World Cup. We're going to have the latest from the home nations in qualifying action this evening. And there's a storm brewing at the T20 World Cup as South Africa's players